and she will offer to round this group up. She will offer a perspective of communities, and she will talk about the role of communities in this whole challenge that we're trying to solve together. And she'll also talk to us about a culture of care, which I'm really looking forward to. So Meera will be talking freely, so I will come back to the main meeting and give the word to Meera.
Thanks so much, Lena. And thank you to GreenBuzz for organizing this and bringing me on. Thanks, Sami. It's great to be here, and it's been great to hear all the presentations. And there's been resonance in a lot of them, and then there's also been like thoughts of like, oh, that's completely opposite to what I'm going to present. So yeah, for me, it's really about presenting the view of community initiatives and how we sit in this whole universe of sustainability and climate action. And a lot of the communities Ecolise represents are based around the need for, well, they came out of their local context, but it comes from their need to deal with the things that they saw going wrong around within their environment. And so the focus is really climate action and also sustainability and linking up with the SDGs. For me, I think just to give you kind of overall direction of how we operate for us, and I'll use a quote by an American activist. In order to change, transform the world, we must change, transform ourselves. So it's a quote by Grace Lee Boggs. And for us, that's the entire kind of our reasoning of how we operate. Community-led initiatives really are about modeling the change that we want to see in the world. So it's really focused on what you can do in your local community that is helpful for not only your own community and meets your own needs, but also something that can be scaled out and that can showcase that there is a different way of doing things and that there is a different way of running economy, having governance structures, and also how you operate and also are in relation with each other. So for me, the present and the future is really about building flourishing, thriving communities that provide care and concern needed to make collective liberation happen. And that again is giving homage to a lot of Black activists and a lot of Black women who have been talking about collective liberation for a long, long time. And I think for us, that's really at the heart of it. How do you untangle yourself, and how do you liberate yourself from all these systems of oppression and interconnected systems of oppression? And for us, capitalism is one of them. So we don't think capitalism is something that you can reform. So you can't go from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, even though a lot of the words used to describe shareholder capitalism are the words that we use. So regenerative economy, inclusivity, diversity, meeting the needs of people. But we just feel that capitalism is the antithesis to what being in a sustainable ecology means, and what it means to be caring for the people and caring for the planet. So it's really about moving certain economies towards, our emphasis is around degrowth, and going towards a post growth scenario when it comes to economic dealings. And it really is about what stories we tell ourselves and what narratives we're forming around how we operate and what we think is necessary. And COVID-19 really put everything into the spinner around this. We were told within the EU and when the Green Deal was happening that, no, this is the money we have, we can't find any more money, this is what we're going to spend on. We were told, no, universal basic income is a very foreign concept, it can never be applicable. And now we're seeing when COVID happened, lots of things changed, and what was once considered impossible became possible. Same with teleworking. The disability community has been asking for teleworking for a long, long time. And they were always told, no, you have to be in the office because this is how the systems work, and this is how we understand work, and it's the 9 to 5, and there's no flexibility. And as soon as COVID hit, everyone who was able to and had the privilege to had to work from home. And everyone made it happen. The European Commission, that does not use outside tools for interacting and engagement, had to shift to online tools and started using tools that they wouldn't have even considered possible before. So change can always happen, and change is necessary, and change needs to be embraced. And for us, what we say is we are trying to tell the story of thriving, resilient communities that are supporting the planetary health, regeneration, that are based on already widespread and diverse work of people and communities from across Europe, that are coming to all these issues with creative solutions and creative actions. And they are trying to deal with some of the biggest challenges that we face today, including climate breakdown. But for communities, climate isn't something separate from what is happening around their social lives. It's not separate from how we interact with the economy. It's not separate from how you see racism, how you see inequity in society. So everything's very interconnected. So when communities come together around, if a community came together because they wanted to really set up a renewable, a kind of self-governed community energy initiative, they quickly realized that it's not just about creating energy for the community from renewable energy systems. It's about looking at how inequity impacts our community, how the structures within our community are based on certain power dynamics. And so those also need to be addressed when we are looking at different solutions. And research, we've been collecting a lot of research. Every 2 years, we publish a really big report. It's a kind of a status report on how community initiatives are faring, and really try to collect data on the impact they're having in terms of emissions reductions, and how they're also putting forth alternative lifestyles to the current carbon intensive lifestyles that many of us lead, and how they are really can enhance not just even biodiversity, but they're fostering independence from the fossil fuel economy. So just in terms of how we define what we're asking for is moving away from these extractive, exploitative systems, not just economic systems, but relationships that we are in. So very extractive and exploitative relationships, destructive social and ecological relationships that we're in, and moving towards more nurturing relationships where ownership of resources and ownership of material really is in the hand of communities. And communities are the co-users who then who understand their basic needs, and then they try to develop solutions based on their own context and their needs. And we feel that creating these nurturing environments is also an opportunity to nurture creativity. A lot of what we see from community initiatives is that they're hubs for social innovation. A lot of innovation comes from local communities, things that people think about doing differently. So it's really about kind of allowing the space for people to come together and expand their capacities to not only understand their context, but also come up with solutions. And so that's why we always advocate for the solutions to be local, and for the support to be provided to local institutions. And within the Green Deal, and the recovery package, that's what we're kind of pushing the EU to do more of, to set up dedicated funding streams and earmarked streams for community initiatives to be directly able to access financing to be able to create the space to be creative, experiment, and come up with solutions that meet their needs. And just to touch upon, and this kind of neatly ties into a theory of change that I personally have, but also many communities also talk about it in different ways. But for me, a culture of care is really in opposition to the culture of violence and extraction that currently we run upon. And we saw that with COVID-19, that things and jobs and people that we didn't have much regard for earlier, for example, care work and care workers, they became so important. And finally, people realized, oh my God, care work is so important. This is what we need to survive. And then we realized that a lot of the care workers are not paid enough. And so what are we investing in? We're investing according to what we put value towards. So far, the capitalist economy puts value onto what leads to profit. It doesn't put value on people. It doesn't value humanity. It doesn't value people. And for me, creating a culture of care is flipping that around. So focusing on people, focusing on cooperation, focusing on solidarity, focusing on restoring personal and societal well-being in order to transition towards an economy that puts care and people at the center and not profits or shareholders or the next big idea. It's not about a few people being the kind of leaders and thought leaders and innovation leaders. It's about bringing the solutions down to the local communities and listening to what their solutions are and seeing how some of those solutions can be scaled out. So for us, we really try to focus on creating these spaces where we can nurture not only what's happening on the ground and support the innovation that's happening, but also look at what the practices have been, what the learning has been, how do we create enabling environments to people to come and experiment and to come and say, okay, maybe I'm ready to change, but how do I do this? So I'm going to come into a community, a learning community, where I'm probably going to pick up some ideas, and then I'll have my own ideas on how to improve things around me, but also for those that I am in community with. So yeah, it's really kind of for me, it's switching our brain over from what we're taught all our lives. And the narrative that capitalism has, which is about competition, which is about scarcity, which is about fear. And for me, capitalism, like climate breakdown, is a manifestation of existing systems of oppression, which I'll name here, and it might irk some people, but for those systems of oppression which need to be named are colonization, patriarchy, white supremacy. These are the dominant forces that drive our stories, our narratives, our economies, how we are in relation with each other. And unless we flip that around, unless we dismantle all these systems, interconnected systems of oppression, we're never going to find the solutions that are the right solutions, that will get to a place where the planet and us as people can be thriving. And for me, it's really important to get us to a place where everyone is in a position to thrive, not just survive. Currently, everyone's just surviving this system that we have, especially Black, Indigenous people of color. And that's what we've seen with the uprisings in the US and across Europe, that people are coming to terms with the system of violence that has been created. And unless we create alternatives to the system of violence, we're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. Even if there are little improvements and little reforms here and there, we're not gonna get to a place where we see a complete transformation of where we need to be in the world, where everyone feels like they can belong and thrive. So yeah, I just wanted, so yeah, time check. I think I'm over my time, but I'd be happy to talk about culture of care more in detail because it has many layers. It's not just about self-care. It has many layers and it's very structured. So I'd be happy to talk about it, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meera. I was just seeing this one question. Yes, so thank you so much. It's really important to bring it back to us and connect it to all of these different things that are happening right now. We created this event when we were just really talking about COVID and the pandemic, but since then this global uprising where people are talking about these systems of oppression that you rightly named, and yes, it has roots in the U.S. but it is growing conversation in Europe, in Germany especially, not even especially, but I'm here, so I hear it a lot. But this process of unlearning is really important, and we're talking about, we've already heard about trying to shift the paradigm shift that needs to happen within corporations with B-Lab and within the Green New Deal and connecting these things. And yeah, someone earlier also asked, does the Green New Deal make space for small and medium-sized enterprises? And I think within that, we're also asking about community initiatives, like you asked. And yeah, my question to you really, I guess, is that all of this might seem a little hippy-dippy for people, especially after we listen to very heavy economic talks. But these things are happening. So could you give us maybe an example of where you see the strongest push for it right now, I guess, or the strongest realization of these culture of cares at the moment?
I guess the strongest push is with now that people are realizing that everything is interconnected. So you can't just say, oh, climate justice, and then not realize that within the climate movement, there's no reckoning about racial injustice. And for me, all the things are very tied. Economic justice has led to what I call environmental racism. A lot of people, communities of color, are the ones most impacted by environmental racism because they're in areas with the most amount of pollutants. So this is not something new. People are just connecting the dots in different ways. But for me, that's why I love the demands from the movement for Black Lives, where they're calling for abolition. And for me, culture of care fits into the abolition framework because it's really understanding how are we in relation with ourselves, with each other, with the planet. Currently, our systems are those of punitive justice, carceral, violent systems. So unless we want, and no matter how many reforms or tweaks we make to the system, in the end, it's still an exploitative, extractive system. So if we want change, then we have to reconsider what we value. If we really say we value Black lives, then how are we showing that? If we really say we value, if we care about climate justice and we care about our environment, then why are we just talking about emission reductions? Why aren't we talking about the impact on people's lives? Why aren't we talking about who it impacts the most? So for me, like these conversations about targets, I've been in the climate justice movement for 20 years and I've been doing all sorts of work around, emissions reductions and cap and trade. But for me, really, it comes down to the reality is, how are we in relation with each other? How are we taking care of each other? If we are taking care of each other, then we'll learn how to take care of the planet too. We're not separate from nature.
Thank you so much. Very necessary to have this perspective with everything, and I hope that in our breakout groups we can try to tie in all of these different perspectives together. So I think we are trying to move into breakout groups, so I'll hand it over to Lena again. I don't know